On board the Royal Caribbean cruise line, Radiance of the Seas, we traveled through the iconic Panama Canal from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. The canal is listed as one of the 7 wonders of the modern world by the American Society of Civil Engineers. The Panama Canal, how it operates and how it came to be. The Panama Canal was one of the greatest engineering feats ever undertaken when it opened in 1914. No other construction of comparable size was undertaken until the Hoover Dam in the 1930s. Cross-section of the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is approximately 51 miles, 82 kilometers from deep water in the Atlantic Ocean to the deep water in the Pacific Ocean. A series of 3 locks raise vessels from the Atlantic Ocean to the level of Gatun Lake, 85 feet above the Atlantic. Then vessels travel 21 miles to the town of Gamboa. Past Gamboa, the vessel enters the narrow Culebra Cut, carved through the Culebra Mountain. The Culebra Cut was 39 feet, 12 meters above sea level. The original mountain was 210 feet, 64 meters high. Vessels then traveled the narrow Culebra Cut, 8.7 miles or 14 kilometers, to the Pedro Miguel Lock. At the Pedro Miguel Lock, the vessels are then lowered to the small Miraflores Lake. The vessels next travel about a mile, 1.7 kilometers, to the Miraflores Locks. From the 2 Miraflores Locks, the vessels are finally lowered onto the Pacific Ocean. Or vice versa, Miraflores Locks raise vessels from the Pacific Ocean, and Gatun Locks descend vessels to the Atlantic Ocean. The canal operates 24 hours per day. Vessels are received on first come, first serve. It can accommodate, with the opening of the 3rd set of locks, 36 to 40 vessels per day. Depending upon the size of the ship and water condition, wait time can be as much as 15 days. A container ship may pay over $100,000 in toll fees, while mega-sized bulk carriers' fees reach $500,000 to $600,000. Additional costs can be incurred for a skip-the-line advance reservation fee and special handling by tugboats and line handlers and drought conditions. A cargo ship in 2023 paid $2.4 million in fees. The lowest toll ever paid was in 1928 when Richard Halliburton, at age 28, an American, swam the length of the Panama Canal, costing 36 cents, or in today's dollars, $5.23. The average fee for a U.S. warship to go through the canal is $30,000 per transit. Only 30 or 40 warships and other government vessels, like a naval repair ship, a cruise ship, adds up to just several $million priority per year on an average. For its passengers, paid over $200,000 per trip. To cross the Panama Canal from the Atlantic side, one first sees ships waiting for their turn to go through the canal. Then a bridge, aptly named the Atlantic Bridge, Puente de Atlántico, built in 2019, is soon sighted, the newest of 3 bridges on the canal route. The ship approaches the Gatun Lock. The Gatun Locks raise or lower ships a total of 85 feet, 26 meters, through a series of 3 lock chambers that lift the vessel up to the level of the Gatun Lake or down to the Atlantic Ocean. There are 2 sets of locks. Each operate independently in either directions. The paired locks also offer redundancy. If one set of locks needs maintenance or has a mechanical issue, the other can still be used. When a vessel arrives at the locks, Panama Canal Authority pilots takes full control of the vessel's navigation during transit. While the vessel's captain maintains control of the vessel's operation, the Panama Canal Authority ensures the vessel can safely navigate the locks and the infrastructure. With pilot on board, the vessel is directed to a lock with the same water level as the vessel. The lock is closed, then water lifts the vessel 28 to 29 feet in height, comparable to the water level of the adjacent lock. Today, 100 years later, mechanical mules still tow and guide ships through the locks. The term mules goes back to the 1800s when boats on the Erie Canal in New York were towed by actual mules. An early 1900s version of the mechanical mule in operation. The process is repeated in the second and third lock, each lifting the vessel another 28 feet or so. By the completion of the third lock, the gates open, the vessel will be the same level as Gatun Lake. Mules complete the process, towing the vessel onto the lake. Vessels travel 3 hours on the open freshwater Gatun Lake past Gamboa, popular resort town, the jumping off to the Gamboa Rainforest Reserve. Just south of Gamboa is the narrow 8.75 miles, 14 kilometers Culebra Cut that allowed vessels to sail over the Culebra Mountains toward the Pacific, the biggest hurdle to overcome in building the Panama Canal. Just before the Pedro Miguel Lock is the Centennial Bridge, constructed to reduce traffic congestion on the Bridge of the Americas. The bridge was named for Panama's centennial occurring on November 3, 2003. The bridge was inaugurated on schedule, although it wasn't open for traffic until September 2005, when the new highways leading to it were finished. On Gatun Lake, the vessel will travel about 3 hours to Pedro Miguel locks. These locks allow ships to ascend from Gatun Lake to the Miraflores Lake, which is at a lower elevation than the Pacific Ocean. While Gatun locks are a 3-step system, the single-step Pedro Miguel and 2-step Miraflores locks are separated by a mile-wide, 1.5-kilometer Lake Miraflores. The reason they aren't located in the same place is due to an active tectonic fault lies beneath the lake. The chamber were unable to be constructed because of the engineering limitations of the time. Miraflores Locks on the Pacific side of the canal is about 20 miles from Panama City. About a mile down from the Miraflores Lock is the Bridge of the Americas, Puente de las Americas. Was opened in 1962, part of the Pan American Highway, at a cost of $20 million. The traffic over the bridge was originally around 9,500 vehicles per day. However, this expanded over time, and by 2004, the bridge was carrying 35,000 vehicles per day.
Yes. But and all of us, we moved away from anything that has auto. We missed the tunnels. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
After passing the Bridge of Americas, vessels officially enter the Pacific Ocean. In about 8 to 10 hours, traveled 51 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. Panama Canal's impact on worldwide commerce. 5 to 6% of the world's trade goes through the Panama. If a ship had to navigate down and around Cape Horn, South America, it would have to travel nearly 12,500 miles or 20,000 kilometers more than through the Panama. A container ship could save 13 to 14 days travel time using the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal was completed in 1914, though it really began 400 years earlier. It was in 1501 that Rodrigo de Bastidas led the first Europeans to visit Panama. Columbus did visit Panama in 1502 on his last voyage to the Americas. On September 25, 1513, Vasco Núñez de Balboa led the first Europeans to reach the Pacific Ocean from the New World. Balboa later commissioned to build ships to explore his new ocean. Unfortunately, he at age 43 was beheaded by a political rival. Balboa did write in his journal the possibility of a canal, but it wasn't until 1534 when the Emperor Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire ordered a survey in Panama for ships traveling between Spain and Peru. Unable to find a water route, the Los Cruces and Camino Real trails linked Panama City and the Pacific with the Nombre de Dios and Portobello and the Atlantic. Panama's location connecting the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean made it a natural hub for travel and trade. Panama was a key point for transfer of gold and silver from Spanish colonies in the Americas, particularly Peru. It is estimated that of all the gold entering Spain from the New World between 1531 and 1660, 60% had arrived at its destination via Panama. The vast quantities of precious metals passing through Panama made it a highly attractive target for pirates and privateers. A privateer was a pirate commissioned by governments to sail in privately owned ships, robbing merchant vessels and pillage settlements belonging to rival nations. The most famous of all privateers is probably English Admiral Francis Drake, who made a fortune in 1572 plundering Panama and ships on the Spanish Main. Queen Elizabeth I knighted him considering the fame and riches he brought back to England, but to Spain he was always considered a pirate. Drake would lead the first Englishmen to circumvent the globe 1577 to 80 and be a key figure against the Spanish Armada in 1588, and even served as mayor of Plymouth and in Parliament from 3 different districts. He was continually called into service against the Spanish. In his last voyage to the New World, he ironically died of dysentery in 1596 off the coast of Panama. 100 years later, in 1671, another privateer, Henry Morgan, with a fleet of 36 ships, sacked and burned to the ground Panama City. Morgan's men looted the isthmus, making himself and the British crown wealthy, and the anger of the Spanish. Morgan would be knighted and appointed Territories Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. Much later, a popular brand of rum is named after him. By the time Panama City was rebuilt, the isthmus became less strategic as galleon ships could reach Spain by rounding Cape Horn. The Panama route was expensive because of the unloading and loading required to trek from one coast to the other. Panama declared independence from Spain in 1821 and joined the Republic of Gran Colombia, which also included Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela. This was a short-lived coalition that dissolved in 1831. After Gran Colombia dissolved in 1831, Panama remained part of Colombia. The elite's wealth stemmed from the land holdings, which were valuable for agriculture and resource extraction, aligned with the conservative politicians in Colombia at that time. In Panama, the elite was a group of less than 10 extended families. The derogatory term Rabi Blanco, white tail, has been used for generations to refer to the usually Caucasian members of those elite families. Things changed with the start of the California gold rush in 1849. The Panama route was a popular shortcut for reaching California. Gold seekers could travel by ship to the Atlantic side of Panama, cross the Isthmus of Panama, and then take another ship to San Francisco. This route was significantly shorter than sailing around Cape Horn or faster traveling overland by wagon from St. Joseph, Missouri. With the help of U.S. government subsidy, the Panama Railway was completed in 1855 across the isthmus from Colon to Panama City. In April 1856, a conflict known as the Watermelon Riot occurred when a mob of angry Panamanians attacked a group of American travelers heading to California after one traveler stole a watermelon from a local fruit vendor. The outbreak prompted the U.S. to send troops to protect the railroad stations. This was the first of many times that the U.S. used troops to intervene in Panama. The success of the railroad renewed interest for a water route between the Caribbean and the Pacific through Panama, first envisioned by Balboa in 1543. Ferdinand de Lesseps, a French diplomat and engineer, spearheaded the French effort to build the Panama Canal in the 1880s. He was best known for his successful construction of the Suez Canal. De Lesseps proposed an all-water route through Panama, much like his successful Suez Canal, started in 1859, completed 10 years later in 1869. De Lesseps was not successful with the Panama Canal. Bankrupt, he abandoned the project in 1889. Why? The mountainous, rugged terrain of Panama with the dense jungle proved more difficult to excavate than the flat desert of the Suez Canal. Costs increased due to landslides and floods. Tropical diseases like yellow fever and malaria decimated the workforce, with an estimated 3/4 of the French engineers dying within 3 months of arriving in Panama. In 1894, a second French company was formed to take over the project. It only got worse. They soon sought a buyer. The failure of French canal ventures and ongoing political instability in Colombia exacerbated the tension on Panama's elite. Separation with Colombia was inevitable. The elite found allying with powerful foreign interests in pursuit of their own economic and political goals. A good example was the Panama Railroad, built by American companies, created a lucrative business for the elite who often controlled the key infrastructure and trade routes. The elite found their ally, Teddy Roosevelt, the newly installed President of the United States, who replaced William McKinley, assassinated just 6 months in his second term. In 1901, Roosevelt spoke in a speech to Congress regarding the Panama Canal. No single great material work which remains to be undertaken on this continent, is as of such consequence to the American people. Roosevelt acted quickly in 1902. The U.S. reached an agreement to buy rights to the French canal property and equipment for $40 million. The U.S. then began negotiating a Panama Treaty with Colombia. Newspaper publisher William Randolph Hearst said the only way we could secure a satisfactory concession from Colombia would be to go down there, take the contending statement by the necks, and hold a batch of the mini office long enough to get a contract in mind. Roosevelt and the Panamanians collaborated on a revolution. The battle for Panama lasted only a few hours. Colombian soldiers in Colon were bribed $50 each to lay down their arms. The USS Nashville cruised off the Panamanian coast in a show of support. Thus, in 1903, with U.S. support, Panama split from Colombia and became an independent republic. The new government under Manuel Amador Guerrero quickly accepted a canal treaty with the United States. A payment of $10 million secured a canal zone and rights to build. Political power remained concentrated in a small elite. The U.S. quickly assumed control. Americans wrote in advance the Panamanian Constitution. The wife of a pro-canal lobbyist, Philip Buena Varela, had sewn the country's first flag. $40 million was given to J.P. Morgan for distribution to French stockholders of the Panama Canal project to go away. In 1904, the Americans' first year in Panama, the chief engineer, John Finley Wallace, neglected to organize the efforts or to develop an action plan. The food was putrid, the living conditions abysmal, political red tape put a stranglehold on appropriations. Disease struck and 3 out of 4 Americans booked passage home. Engineer Wallace soon followed. Wallace's replacement was the rugged and ingenious John Stevens, who built the Great Northern Railroad across the Pacific Northwest. The kind of work that needed done could only be done by a well-housed, well-fed, disease-free labor force. Stevens began work not by digging, but by cleaning. Brought on board was Dr. William Gorgas, who had helped to eradicate yellow fever in Havana years before by killing the mosquitoes that carried it. They sprayed pesticides by the ton. Entire towns rose from the jungle, complete with housing, schools, churches, commissaries, and social halls. By December 1905, yellow fever had been officially eradicated on the isthmus. The canal's design also changed. Instead of a sea-level design favored by the French that would take longer and costlier to build, John Stevens wanted a lock-to-lake-to-lock design. Ironically, the plan was nearly identical to one proposed by the French engineer Gaudin de Lepine in 1879 at the same meeting in which de Lesseps promoted his sea-level plan. The Chagres River would be dammed to create the Gatun Lake. It required hundreds of natives to be relocated from the valley. There were major advantages for this plan. First, the less need for digging. The man-made Gatun Lake, located in a valley, required little, if any, digging, and the infamous Culebra Cut would only need to go down 82 feet less, thus complete the project sooner. Secondly, the canal needed a massive amount of fresh water to operate. Each ship required 50 million gallons of fresh water to go through the Panama Canal. Thankfully, Panama's average 130 inches rainfall yearly. Gatun Lake stores that rainwater for the canal to operate. Note, more water is lost from Gatun Lake due to evaporation than in the operation of the locks. Why not seawater? It is expensive to pump and so corrosive that it damages pipes and all the equipment that water comes into contact. The seawater requires more upkeep maintenance than fresh water. Further, seawater over time is even more harmful, impacting Panama's ecosystem. It carries invasive species, non-native plants, animals, or other organisms that can cause harm to a new environment. The saline alone makes water unsuitable for freshwater plants, fish, and other wildlife, and diminish water for drinking and agricultural use. As freshwater Gatun Lake flourished, Imbera natives were allowed to resettle on the shores of Gatun Lake. Stevens began work on a scale never before witnessed. Gigantic Bucyrus steam shovels scooped tons of earth. Railroad cars ran continuously on a double track, dumping the tailings to form the Charges Dam. In November 1906, Roosevelt himself visited the canal, posing at the controls of a Bucyrus shovel. In 1907, Chief Engineer Stevens resigned. Colonel George Washington Goethals, an Army engineer with experience building lock-type canals, assumed command. Demanding and rigidly organized, Goethals quickly picked up where Stevens left off. At the Culebra Cut, 100 million cubic yards of earth and rock would have to be removed. The laborers at Culebra, mostly West Indian blacks who made 10 cents an hour, moved as much as 200 trainloads of dirt a day. Heavy rains, 9 months out of the year, meant mudslides filled the cut repeatedly. Goethals simply ordered it dug out again. There were accidents of all sorts, lost equipment, and deaths. So where did all that dirt go? A significant portion of the excavated material was used to build the Gatun Dam. Completed in 1912, was constructed across the Chagres River, creating the artificial lake, Gatun Lake, that provided the water used to operate the canal's lock. After the canal opened in 1914, the new Gatun hydroelectric plant took over generating the electric power for the canal's operation. Instead of using special water pumps, the operation only required gravity to raise or lower the water in the locks. Culverts, the size of railroad tunnels, were built to channel water from Gatun Lake into the locks. Dirt was also used to expand U.S.-controlled Zone City, Balboa, and create the Amador Causeway to U.S. forts protecting the Panama Canal. Today, these are now trendy resort areas of Panama. In May 1913, steam shovels broke through the Culebra Cut, and the last cement was poured at the Gatun locks. Workers poured enough concrete to build a wall 8 feet wide and 12 feet high. The Chagres River filled Lake Gatun, and engineers prepared for the canal's first trial run. It came on September 26, 1913. The tugboat Gatun traveled through the first set of locks and out onto Lake Gatun. The Panama Canal officially opened August 15, 1914. The SS Ancon was the first ship to pass through the Panama Canal. The world scarcely noticed the opening of the canal. German troops were driving across Belgium toward Paris. The newspapers relegated Panama to their back pages. The greatest engineering project in the history of the world had been dwarfed by the totality of World War I. Up from the Gatun Lake on the Chagres River was added the Madden Dam, first opened in 1935, which gave rise to Lake Alajuela, about twice the size of Gatun Lake. This served as a backup for Gatun Lake's water for the canal during times of drought. In addition, hydroelectric generating station at the dam provided electricity to operate the locks and other equipment in the canal. To this day, Lake Alajuela, created by the Madden Dam, is pristine and noted for protecting the many rare plants and animals in the canal basin, including the Imbera people allowed to settle on the lake. The U.S. cost of building the Panama Canal exceeded $352 million, $11 billion in today's money. During that U.S. period, 1904 to 14, 5,600 deaths were officially recorded. Only 350 were Americans. The majority of deaths were aliens, a reference to blacks from Barbados and Jamaica. As a comparison, during the French attempt to build the Panama Canal in the 1880s, approximately 20 to 22,000 workers died, largely due to malaria and other tropical diseases. Over 75,000 men and women were employed on the Panama Canal projects from 1881 to 1914. Their efforts, which began with the French ownership in 1881, saw a peak workforce of 19,000 in 1884, mainly from the West Indies. The workers struggled not only the treacherous working conditions, but high death tolls from tropical diseases like malaria and yellow fever. During construction under American ownership, 1904 to 1914, laborers were typically paid around $1 per day, with some skilled workers earning more. There was also a segregated payment system where white, with very few exceptions, American and Northern European white workers were placed on the gold payroll, and blacks from the Caribbean, often Barbados or Jamaica, and Southern European workers on the silver payroll. Black Americans were generally not hired. By 1906, 3,700 gold road employees were almost all white Americans, and the 13,000 silver road workers were mostly aliens. All workers living in the canal zone were provided with housing, typically free, but with varying qualities depending on race and job type. White Americans enjoyed more comfortable, airy structures with screened verandas, while black laborers had less desirable options like barracks or shacks in derelict villages. The system also included separate housing for single men, different accommodations for those on the gold payroll, higher paid, versus the silver payroll. From 1903 until 1979, the Panama Canal Zone was a concession of the United States. It consisted of the Panama Canal and extended 5 miles on each side of the center line, but excluding Panama City and Colón. Its own capital was Balboa. A U.S. military post was established to protect the Panama Canal Zone For nearly 100 years, the Panama Canal Zone was essentially a little America in the middle of Latin America's Panama. In the Canal Zone, the American civilian population average included 4,000 zone employees, their dependents 20,000, and other Americans living in the zone 10,000. The military personnel was about 10,000. During the Korean War, the zone population swelled to 100,000. There are no public records on what the U.S. spent to maintain its presence in the zone, hidden in the U.S. defense budget. The U.S. subsidized the high school, hospital, and other services for the civilians. The treaty with Panama made no mention of the nationality status of the zone. Children of non-citizen U.S. nationals generally acquired the status of their parents. In 1937, Congress clarified that persons born since 1904 in the Canal Zone is a U.S. citizen, so long as at least one parent is a U.S. citizen. This issue came up when John McCain, born in the zone in 1936 to U.S. parents, became the 2008 Republican Party presidential nominee. There was a minor debate over whether he met the presidency's natural-born citizen requirement. The U.S. Senate passed a resolution stating that he did. One reason the U.S. built the Panama Canal was it could move naval vessels between the Pacific and the Atlantic coasts. Many vessels were built with the Panama Canal original dimension limits, Panamax width of 110 feet. One of the first U.S. aircraft carriers, USS Lexington CV-2, in Panama Canal Lock in March 1928, had a beam width of 106 feet. The USS Missouri BB-63 made a transit through the Panama Canal in 1945 while en route from the Pacific to New York City. The ship's beam was 108 feet and some inches, leaving a small margin of clearance on each side to clear the canal. In 1939, U.S. Congress authorized the construction of a new set of locks large enough to carry the larger warships that the United States was building at the time. The work proceeded for several years, and significant excavation was carried out on the new approach channels, but the project was canceled after World War II. After World War II, U.S. control of the Canal Zone became increasingly tense. Many Panamanians felt that the zone rightfully belonged to Panama. Demands for the United States to hand over the canal to Panama increased in 1956 when the U.S. supported Egypt in taking the Suez Canal from France and the UK. Panamanian unrest culminated in riots on Mortar Day, 9 January 1964, when about 20 Panamanians and 5 U.S. soldiers were killed. In 1977, under the Trujillo-Carter Treaty, the United States gave Panama full control of the Canal Zone on December 31, 1999. The Canal Zone, controlled by the U.S. on Panamanian soil, was not good optics for U.S.-world relations, and it was projected by 1999 the Panama Canal would need major repairs and upgrades to allow larger-sized vessels to use the canal. After 6 years, 120 studies on the future economic viability of the Panama Canal, Panama passed a national referendum to expand the Panama Canal. It included the construction of a third set of locks to accommodate the larger Neo-Panamax ships. The new locks could accommodate larger vessels, Neo-Panamax size, that could not go through the old locks. The new locks are 189 feet wide, 1,401 feet long, and 60 feet deep. Old locks was only 110 feet wide, 950 feet long, and 40 feet deep. After 6 years, 120 studies on the viability of the Panama Canal, Panama passed a national referendum to expand the Panama Canal. It included the construction of a third set of locks on the very spot the U.S. started building in 1939. The Panamanian plan was more ambitious. The Panama government began the canal expansion started in 2007 with 36,000 workers. 90.5% were Panamanian citizens. This was twice the number of workers employed in the building of the Panama in 1904 to 1914. The new locks under construction 2013. The old locks under construction 1913. The new locks, 8 on the Atlantic and 8 on the Pacific, use rolling channels that can open and close in just 5 minutes. Every effort was made to protect the environment. Animals were moved and trees were replanted. Archaeologists and paleontologists were allowed to carry out excavation work in areas where bulldozing had taken place. The new locks are designed with water-saving basins to efficiently reuse water, recovering as much as 60% of the water used in the old locks. The new expanded third locks officially inaugurated June 26, 2016. It took almost as much time to build as the original canal in 1914. On the Atlantic side, the locks are called Agua Clara, after one of the villages that flooded during the creation of Gatun Lake. On the Pacific side, the locks are called Kukoli, after one of the African village that brought slaves to the New World into an area now populated by free slaves. Electric mules still continue pulling vessels through the old locks. Instead of mules, tugboats are used to pull the vessels through the new locks. The expansion doubled the cargo capacity of the Panama Canal, allowing for greater trade and economic activity. The total cost of the project was over $5.2 billion. In addition, the costs included widening and deepening the old existing channels. Annual traffic rose from about 1,000 ships in 1914, when the canal opened, to a total of 9,944 vessels passed through the Panama Canal in 2024. The canal is opened every day, 24 hours. 30 to 40 ships transit the canal per day. Each ship takes about 11 and a half hours to pass between the canal's 2 outer locks. The top 5 users of the canal were the United States, China, Japan, South Korea, and Mexico. The 2024 traffic was actually a 29% drop compared to the 12,638 transits in the previous fiscal year. The reduction was largely due to a severe drought, which led to restrictions on vessels, draft, and the number of transits allowed. Due to global warming, a significant reduction in rainfall requires diverting rivers and pump water to run the canal. The Panama Canal uses daily 7 billion gallons of water from Gatun Lake to operate its lock systems. This amount of water is equivalent to about 2.5 times the amount a city like New York uses daily. The lake also provides drinking water to a significant portion of Panama's population, including major cities like Panama City and Cologne. As an alternative to ships, some cargo containers use rail transportation across the isthmus to awaiting ships. The Panama Canal Railway takes about an hour to cross the isthmus, covering a distance of 47.6 miles. This railway connects the cities of Cologne on the Atlantic side and Balboa on the Pacific side near Panama City. Mexico is developing the interoceanic corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, CIIT, as an alternative to the Panama Canal. This project involves a new railway connecting the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean, offering a potential shortcut for ships to bypass the canal. The CIIT aims to provide a faster and potentially more reliable route, especially during periods of reduced water levels or disruptions to the Panama Canal. The project involves a 188-mile or 302-kilometer railway, new ports, and improvements to existing infrastructure. The current estimated budget is $7.5 billion to complete the project. In addition, Panama is allowing oil tankers to pass oil cargo via trucks and/or pipelines to other tankers across the isthmus. The Panamanians take pride in the accomplishments of the Panama Canal. As many as 800 employees work on the canal each and every day. Panama Canal Authority employees on average have 17.4 years of service. A significant portion, 59% of the workforce, has worked between 11 and 41 years, showcasing a high level of job stability and low attrition with a rate of 1.9% in 2012. This pride is reflected in the canal's revenue that has shown significant growth in recent years. In fiscal year 2024, the Panama Canal reported a net income of $3.45 billion, despite facing challenges due to severe drought conditions. In 2023, the Panama Canal's revenue reached $4.986 billion, marking a record high. Tolls are the main source of income, accounting for around 80% of the total revenue. Another 18% is derived from value-added services, such as fees for booking, appointments for a specific date and time to use the canal, inspection, security, and tugboat assistance. After World War II, the U.S. was reluctant to commit to the future of the Panama Canal. There was less military need to move ships between the Atlantic and the Pacific. The high cost to maintain the canal and the costly U.S. civilian personnel and families working in the canal zone. The canal was thus given to Panama. Panama spent billions to upgrade the canal, all the while protecting the environment for both the wildlife and people who live within Panama. Now that the canal is profitable, there's talk of the U.S. taking it back. The revenues generated by the canal are important for Panama, representing about 4% of their GDP. They represent less than 1/10,000th of the U.S. GDP. It sounds un-American to expropriate the assets of other countries just because we can. Ricardo Hausman, Economic Development Scholar. For more Gong About presentations, YouTube /@Gong4it.